This is the Beatles recording what John Lennon once called our greatest achievement. By 1966, the Beatles were exhausted with touring. The screaming crowds, the endless travel, the lack of artistic freedom, it all left them with a choice. Keep being the world's biggest live band, or reinvent themselves entirely. They chose the latter, and that decision set them on a path toward creating something the world had never heard before. One song in particular would embody this new chapter, Strawberry Fields Forever. A song born from John Lennon's memories of his childhood, transformed in the studio into a psychedelic masterpiece, and stitched together through one of the most daring studio experiments of its time. This is the story of how Strawberry Fields Forever was made. By the summer of 1966, the Beatles had reached a breaking point. Their last tour was chaotic and disheartening. They could barely hear themselves over the screaming fans, and the concerts had become more of a circus act than a musical performance. So they made a bold decision: no more live shows. It was unheard of at the time. Who could imagine a band so famous, so adored, deciding to never play live again? But for the Beatles, it was liberating. Without the pressure of touring, they were free to record music that didn't have to be performed on stage. They could write and arrange songs that pushed the limits of imagination and technology. It was the start of a new chapter, one where the studio itself became their instrument. The seed of Strawberry Fields. Forever came from John Lennon's childhood. Near his Aunt Mimi's house in Liverpool stood a large Victorian building, Strawberry Field, a Salvation Army children's home. As a boy, John would climb over the fence and play in its gardens. Every summer, the home hosted a fair with live music, and Aunt Mimi would take him along. These memories left a deep mark on him. Lennon's childhood was not easy. His parents were largely absent, and he was raised by Aunt Mimi. Music for him was often a way of working through those early wounds. Strawberry Fields Forever was his attempt to capture those feelings of nostalgia, longing, and reflection. In September 1966, while in Spain filming the movie How I Won the War, Lennon began sketching out the song. Even in those first rough demos, just voice and guitar, the haunting, dreamlike quality of the piece was already present. When the Beatles regrouped after their summer break, John brought the song back with him. By this point, the Lennon-McCartney partnership had shifted. Their early hits were often written quickly, side by side. But now, in 1966, they were spending more time working independently, developing their songs with greater depth. So when John played Strawberry Fields Forever for the others, it was already well formed. Paul famously said, "That is absolutely brilliant." The demos showed its potential, but the challenge lay ahead: how to turn this delicate, nostalgic ballad into a finished track that lived up to its promise. On November 24th, 1966, the Beatles entered Abbey Road Studios for their first session since finishing Revolver. It was also the first step toward what would become Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. When asked what he had, John immediately offered Strawberry Fields Forever. The band launched into take one. This first version was sparse. John played electric guitar, George added a slide part, and Ringo kept a light rhythm. Most strikingly, it lacked the famous opening we know today. Instead, it started with the verse. That would change, thanks to Paul McCartney. John had been the first Beatle to discover the mellotron, a keyboard that played pre-recorded tapes of instruments like strings and flutes. But when Paul sat down at it, he came up with the ethereal flute intro that would forever define the song. Suddenly, they had a sound that felt otherworldly, and the path forward became clearer. Over the next few days, the Beatles experimented with arrangement and structure. They lowered the key from C to B flat, reshaped the song to begin with Paul's mellotron intro, and shifted the chorus to the front. By take 4, the song was starting to emerge. George Harrison even added a Morse code-like guitar effect on the mellotron, one of the song's many subtle details. But recording in 1966 came with limitations. Abbey Road only had 4-track tape machines. Every instrument and vocal had to be squeezed onto just 4 tracks. If they needed to add more, they had to bounce down, combining multiple tracks into one, freeing up space but also locking in earlier decisions. Still, they pressed on. By take 6, they had a complete performance. It was beautiful, delicate, and atmospheric. Most bands would have stopped there, but not John Lennon. After listening back, John wasn't satisfied. He told producer George Martin that the track didn't capture the power he imagined. He wanted something bigger, heavier, more intense. So the Beatles started again. George Martin arranged brass and strings, while the band created a thunderous rhythm track. Ringo played the drums with explosive energy, and everyone in the studio grabbed a percussion instrument to pile on top. They added reverse cymbals, layers of guitars, and even the Swarmin' Doll, an Indian harp-like instrument George Harrison had discovered. The tempo was faster, the sound more chaotic, the mood more psychedelic. It was almost unrecognizable compared to the first version. Finally, Lennon seemed satisfied. For now. Not long after, Lennon came back to George Martin with another idea. He admitted he liked both versions, the gentle first take and the explosive second. So he asked Martin, could they combine them into one track? Martin was stunned. The 2 versions were in different keys and at different tempos. In theory, it was impossible. But Lennon, with his usual blend of charm and challenge, simply said, "I'm sure you can fix it." And somehow they did. Engineer Jeff Emmerich and George Martin went to work with scissors and tape machines. They carefully lined up the 2 recordings, adjusting the speed of one until, by sheer coincidence, the tempos matched and the keys aligned. At the 1-minute mark, the song seamlessly shifts from the dreamlike first take into the explosive second. Listeners in 1967 didn't realize they were hearing 2 completely different recordings stitched together. It just sounded like magic. This edit, one of the boldest experiments in popular music at the time, created the final version we know today. Half delicate ballad, half psychedelic storm. After more than a month of work, Strawberry Fields Forever was finished. It never made it onto Sgt. Pepper. Instead, the Beatles released it as a double A-side single with Penny Lane in early 1967. The song was unlike anything audiences had ever heard. Critics praised its innovation, its surreal atmosphere, its refusal to follow convention. Even today, it remains a landmark in the history of recorded music. Strawberry Fields Forever is more than just a Beatles song. It's a symbol of what can happen when creativity meets technology, when limitations are turned into opportunities. Where other bands saw the 4-track machine as a restriction, the Beatles used it to push boundaries further than anyone had imagined possible. And at its heart lies John Lennon's childhood memory, personal, fragile, and deeply human, transformed into an epic piece of art. The song's legacy is not only in its sound, but in what it represents. That music can be both intimate and experimental, both nostalgic and futuristic. From a boy climbing the fence into a Liverpool garden to a band reinventing itself inside Abbey Road, Strawberry Fields Forever is the sound of transformation. It's a song born of memory, shaped by experimentation, and perfected through sheer persistence. What began as a simple demo on a Spanish film set became one of the most celebrated recordings in rock history. For John Lennon, it was his greatest achievement. For us, it remains a reminder of the power of imagination and the courage to chase perfection, even when it seems impossible. Let me take you down, because Strawberry Fields Forever is still the sound of going somewhere the world has never been before. If you enjoy stories like this, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more music history that hits all the right notes.